If you're waiting to hear what this lovely man has to say, we're very excited about today's presentation and looking forward to talking to Callie in just a few minutes. So it's coming up to the 12 o'clock. We've got a lot to talk about, obviously. I'm going to put the air conditioning up so that you're not too hot. And how are we travelling, folks? So we're doing okay. Just checking in with the technical support. It is cozy. Bill and I actually went to a fundraiser together recently while we're waiting. We've got another 6 minutes where, what were we doing? What was the fundraiser for?
What were we doing, or what was the fundraiser for?
Both.
What were we doing?
What was the fundraiser for, firstly?
Well, to Aboriginal kids to help them pursue more creative pursuits, really, and in being creative ourselves is close to our heart, right? Both of us. So that was fun, a little bit unexpected. Some events. I mean, close call on a raft.
I did.
Which yeah, we'll never forget about. It was almost the end of that week, in the middle of it all, but we are here today and we're healthy and happy.
Yeah, we had a really interesting week away. For those of you who were involved in the fundraiser, there's a charity called Walk a While, which is an initiative in Hasts Bluff in the Northern Territory, where they have an art and videography, photography, dance and music school to give children an opportunity to create income streams in the area that they're born in. So it was a fundraiser raising money for Walk a While, but we went away and we shot a television show called Adventure All Stars, and we had to be away for 6 days and do what we thought was extreme sports, but it ended up being water sports. And
that's right.
Well, it wasn't quite as extreme. It wasn't quite as extreme as I thought.
Except your one event.
Yes, but for those of you who would like to know, the event that Callie's alluding to was we had to create rafts out of barrels and ropes, and
we were in opposing teams.
And we were in opposing teams, and there was an incident where our raft was upturned. I shall not tell you who did the upturning of the raft, but yes, it was a dangerous moment. We're still friends. Let's just put it that way. Yes, actually, no. Callie was a lifesaver. He dove into the water and tried to resurrect those that were drowning. But yes.
You make it sound a bit dramatic.
Well, I was drowning.
Yeah.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Okay, so it's 3 minutes to the hour. Just checking with technical support to make sure we're okay. Okay. We look like we're good. So looking forward to today. What have you been working on? We've got 3 minutes while we're waiting. For those of you who are logging on, please put the kettle on, make a cup of tea. We're about to start. It's our lunch and learn. You've got 3 minutes. What are we talking about today?
Behaviour, I think, is interesting. Designed for behaviour, behavioural design. Those things are often mixed up. Design as an idea, because lately, with media, everyone is a designer. It's a weird concept because a chef and a cook is quite different. A cook will never call itself a chef. Now you have to kind of have a certain skill, and maybe you have the same skills, but there's a difference. And design, I suppose, has matured in many ways, and it's made a 360 in many ways as well, or 180 actually. In that it's far more. One needs to be far more responsible in design now, and it's no longer, I think, in a lot of the teaching is still around the ways of the Industrial Revolution, the way we were taught to make things beautiful and harmony and balance and all of those. But it's actually far more involved in that now. And our responsibility towards our clients and towards the end user has become far more complicated. And I don't think the schools have quite caught up with that, and a lot of designers have. I mean, and by and large, I think designers are skilled in what they do to actually apply design in the way that it needs to. Often with clients and don't allow us necessarily. So yeah, I think talk about this. It's today.
We are. We've got another 2 minutes. Thank you very much. I'm just checking with technical support. Make sure we're traveling okay. Thumbs up, looking good. We're all fantastic. So we're 2 minutes away, 1 minute away. If you're joining us, please pull up a chair and a cup of tea. We're looking forward to a very exciting session, and I'm happy to pull away from camera to give Callie a little bit more space if you're feeling.
No, I'm good. No, we tight. We can be tight. It's good.
Well, seeing as you tried to drown me in a recent incident, I'm quite happy to give you as much space as possible. So no, just joking. But another 1 minute and we'll start. And we're so looking forward to Callie joining us. For those of you that don't know Callie, I'll give you 30 seconds to tell us about your business, maybe.
Okay. So I'm an architect, but some years ago decided to focus on interior architecture. Find the space more interesting because of people, and no space is designed and finished until people use it. And so find the dynamic of people within space super interesting, and being involved in many brands, found that people were behaving differently on different sites, although the environments were quite similar on paper. So you think that visually the way things are expressed, and it's kind of corporate colors and corporate shapes and forms and stuff, that these are enough, they're not enough. People were behaving quite differently across brands. There's one brand we did with 140 stores. It's really looking inward on that and trying to understand why that was, looking at security footage and spending a tremendous amount of time in the sites to see what prompted certain behaviors that the interest in design interior became overwhelming. And so architecture is not really a big part of my repertoire anymore.
Well, we'll get to that. We are actually right on the hour. So let me just recap for those of you who are joining us. It's lovely to have you joining us today. We're here with Callie Vandermeer. We do have another event with Callie at the end of the month, which is Designing for Hospitality. So if you haven't registered for that, at the end of the session, we'll be sending out the registration link and you can do the same. Very excited to talk about things have changed. Like, we're living in a whole new world from a design and a hygiene perspective in a post-pandemic society. But today, it's a great pleasure to introduce you to Callie Vandermeer. Callie's from Design Partnership and amongst other things has had a world of experience globally. It's not just an Australian practice. He's worked and lived in South Africa and done quite a lot of designing of hotels, bars, restaurants and the rest, particularly in South Africa, Australia, but also a lot in Europe. So we'll get to a little bit of his business shortly. But today I just want to talk about behavioural design and design versus behaviour and designing for behaviour, and talk about the two terms. Let us talk about the basics first. What is design and what is a designer? Because obviously there's a difference.
Yeah, I think that's a nice way to start, because design is anybody and anything that solves a set of problems within a set of existing constraints. That's it in a nutshell. And it's quite different to decor in a way. Often decor, for the most part, that's there to make a space personable or beautiful, whatever your idea of beauty may be. It doesn't necessarily solve another problem, but it's definitely different to art. Art is a personal journey of the artist, the viewpoint, something that they see or feel. They may express social or political views. They can be vague about what they express. Whereas design can never be vague. Design is vague, is considered bad design. And so, there's the John Mader, he's the principal design and AI vice president at Microsoft. And he says that design is an answer to a problem and art is a question to a problem. They're not related in that way, but not the same problem, obviously, but art just questions a lot of issues. And design is there to answer. So designers have to be disconnected from the problem, whereas artists are completely involved in it. So that's my view, anyway.
Yeah, it's and it is every venue for you is an entirely different prescription, isn't it? I mean, you have to change your thinking at every intersection, right?
So you have to think of the end user. You have to kind of as I said, disconnect yourself. You have to have empathy for the end user and their journey and kind of the core group that'll be using the space. And so it's never a designer should never be personally kind of involved. They're just there to translate and solve the issue.
A little bit like a doctor with a patient. You can't be emotionally involved,
similar,
right?
Actually.
The difference between behavioural design versus design for behaviour.
Yeah, so understanding design. So behavioral design is a combination of psychology and behavioral science. So it's to understand what people do and why they do it and how you can give them more information to make better decisions. It's also termed behavioral change design, because a lot of that is how you change behavior and manipulate it, not in a bad way, but in a way that people could make a healthier or a better choice for themselves. So that's behavioral design. Design for behavior is really taking, I would say, design thinking and behavioral design and applying those into patterns, so you can understand or see from multiple observations across multiple platforms everywhere of spaces that people within hospitality, in certain kinds of hospitality, if you apply certain things, 80% of the time they behave the same. It's a very similar behavior. So if you design patterns for that behavior, you can take a lot of shortcuts and because as designers, we talk about design thinking and we love design thinking and service design thinking, all these things, but it takes a lot of time. And by and large, most designers do not have the luxury of that time. So if you can understand the behaviors and kind of format them to an outcome which you kind of document for repeat use, you get to design for behavior, which is really how we like to think about it.
Right. And we've talked about this before, won't we? Give us a little bit from a spatial psychology perspective. I know we're going off subject for a second, but you're talking about behavioural patterns. Toys R Us, give us the illustration there.
Back in the day, we were involved with Toys R Us, and the American designers at the time, Toys R Us is no more. It's, at the time were quite set in their ways in terms of how the pattern and the flow and all of that should work. And but for some reason it wasn't working in this specific venue. And that was specifically in Cape Town and Johannesburg. And I had a look at the layouts, and a couple of things struck me, and I'm just going to keep it short. One was the flow was not left in right and clockwise like we walk the way we drive. I think that's a term most people know. But also the aisles are too narrow and too high. And so there was a security issue. People felt insecure. Women felt insecure, and that's 70% of the market felt insecure. And so just by lowering the aisles, widening them slightly, and changing the flow, it became a massive success at the time. So yeah, but those are. I mean, that's a good example, but there's many others.
Yeah, and you mirror reverse the foot traffic. I mean, if we're walking into a retail outlet, for example, and you walk to your left and you peel off to the left in Australia, and it's based on an American template, which is walking to the right and peeling off to the right. If you walk into a retail outlet, you're walking straight to the cash register because that's how they close. And so you'd have to mirror reverse. So those behavioural patterns, or even the things that we're unaware of, must come into play with people without realising. If we're walking into a restaurant, for example, there must be a standard, or how do behaviours come into play?
Well, look, so Dan Ariely wrote a book, Predictably Irrational, and there he talks about how we behave so irrationally but predictably. And so we would, for example, that's something that, say, let's take, I don't know, coffee as an example. So coffee is by and large, most places do almost exactly the same. Machines are the same, the recipes are trained the same. Our perception that the coffee is different, it's just our perception. That's based on potentially a whole host of factors, but it could be based on the way that the person behind the counter makes you feel. It's subconscious. It could be based on how the place is designed because it appeals to you, or that people that you know go there, or because we behave in a herd. So we'll walk across a busy street, pay $1.50 more for that coffee when the coffee is exactly the same. So that's just maybe a simple case of kind of behavioral design of how we need to understand those kind of points of reference to be able to design things that actually are to the best benefit, not only of the user, but also of the client. We have a big responsibility to the client to actually design spaces and places that work for what they set out to do. And it's not making it more beautiful or or even winning competitions, because those things are, with respect to designers and architects, but when you judge something, you judge the micro bits of it. Have you looked at the ceiling? What's the junction between the floor? How's it celebrated to the wall? And a whole host of things that architect designers look at, but the public doesn't look at it.
No, they don't.
It's a blend of multiple other things and it comes down to, so a big shift now. And we can say that you look at the modernists, it was form follows function, right? That was a big, but the way things are developed, there was an industrial revolution kind of way of thinking. It's not that anymore. We can't think like that. So it's more kind of a form follows feeling principle, where we really need to understand emotions, because that triggers everything. And if we get that to work, we can get a space to sing and absolutely be enjoyable.
I mean, as an architect and a designer, do you walk into spaces and look at those? I laugh because I think from a temperament perspective, lifestyle stability, information, and the melancholy temperament, I see you as a friend and colleague, as all in the detail. So do you walk into a place, for example, if you walked into a restaurant or a facility or a function centre or a retail outlet, and look at the design element, or do you walk in, you don't?
It's funny, it's yes and no, but I think it's very, so just because my interest is here and my company's interest is here, we have a real, not that, and it's not that different, but really try and look at behavior. Where do people sit?
Yeah.
Why do they sit there? Where do they walk? How long do they stay? And what are they uncomfortable about? And so things like, for example, that are not, you don't find that in Pinterest. Like, for example, what's the acoustics?
Yeah.
If the acoustics are bad, and you and I talk about that quite a bit, if the acoustics are bad, you're uncomfortable, you wouldn't know why. You can't put your finger on it, but you're not quite comfortable. And you think things need to be embellished more, design is missing, it's empty.
Something.
But a space would feel empty very quickly if the acoustics are bad. And so you get things in restaurants called the Lombard effect, where now, because the acoustics are bad, it bounces around, so you and I start talking louder because you can't quite hear, it's not quite crystal. But because we talk louder, next door to us starts talking louder, and then next door starts talking louder, and now we can't hear the music, someone turns up the music. So eventually it's just this crescendo of noise that fills the space. So, I mean, so those kind of things, there's millions of those little things, but the things that make up for the emotive placing and enjoyment or experience of the visitor or consumer or patron, those are the things we look at. It's seldom just what you see. I mean, think about all the senses. We have 5, 6, 7, 8, depending on how deep you want to go, senses that we need to appeal to. So, and visuals is one of those. What about smell, and which we can talk to if you want to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm thinking, we've got a mutual friend in Brian Steele, food critic.
Yeah.
And we've worked with different chefs. How much of the journey is the food in a restaurant, for example? Is it just the food that makes it a location?
Absolutely.
I mean, illustratively, there's a fabulous banh mi place locally, and people queue for 20 minutes to get the taste of that food. But
far much deeper than that.
Tell me.
So let's just talk about the senses for a minute. So we spoke about acoustics, so sight, smell, sound, taste, texture, and touch. So moving to what you just said about food. So food is actually quite far down the spectrum of reasons we go to a restaurant. People think it's food, but it's not food. Food is linked, if you enjoy food. So people think they have a memory of taste, but by and large you don't. You have a memory of experience. So, and that's proven already scientifically, that the taste cortex and the amygdala is linked. So when the experience is really great, it fires up and you remember that experience. And so the taste is something that sticks as part of the experience. And so if you had to ask most people to talk about or ask them what is their best food experience, they will say something like, "It was a time my girlfriend and I went to a hot dog stand and blah, 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 blah." Or the last time, the day I came back from uni and first day my dad put a barbecue, whatever. It's an experience related to people and far larger than just the food. The food is just one of the products, or one of the things that make up the total experience. So food is quite far down. So taste is important. But and so you can talk about you flew for many years, so you know airplane food or that whole thing around airplane food.
I was
The
a
noise.
qualified just that's what that relations do. Yeah, yeah.
And so the noise, kind of the humming sound in your ear the whole time, impacts the way you taste food. It's just so you can't. There's only so much you can do to make, you know. And so they even try and change the kind of makeup of the drivers within that food, and that's why people order so many Bloody Marys, because of the profile of taste. You can actually taste when you're in a plane. The sound doesn't interfere with. Anyway, so then you talk about things like smell. Smell is our biggest trigger, memory trigger, always our biggest memory trigger. And so the smell is good. And people that understand that would make sure that the kitchens are open, not just for the theatre, but the smell that triggers behaviour. And then we have things, apart from the major 5 senses, we have things like proprioception, which is our sense of our limbs in space. And so if you close your eyes, can you touch your nose? And funny, some people can't. The eyes are linked, and it's a very small percentage, but so things like steps. So you scout the space in your mind, you map it, and so people fall over 1 step, but they don't fall over 2, because 1 step is a change in pattern. 2 steps is a pattern, and things like I'm thinking of. Our sense of our interoception, which is our ability, like what our organs in terms of food and how does it make us feel. So if you mix all those things up, how you feel about the food that you have is far more than just a taste, but everything that happens in your body when you have it. And you know there's multiple things, and then all of that plays into your experience of the space. And as I say, aesthetics is just one of those things. It's just one out of many.
Yeah. I don't think that's understood by every designer.
Sure, but I do think that that most designers, and I look at architecture and interior architecture in the city, specifically Sydney, which I love, and I look at the quality of the work and how I think subconsciously through trial and error, most designers actually do things in a correct way. They may make some mistakes because it's not part of what they think about, but they do understand you have to, if you design social spaces, you have to understand how people behave. Even if it's, I'm applying Bradley Michael, which we're talking together at the end of this month. He has done restaurants for 35 years. He started when he was 18 years old, 32 years old. And we often, I said, Bradley, but you are correct, but why are you correct? Why do you say that? He doesn't know why. Intuitively does, because he's made those mistakes. So it comes with experience as well.
Of course, I guess I agree. Look, you're talking about, I'm looking here at the questions and thinking about Bradley, also a South African, and we spoke about travel. We're based here, but your clients are global. How do you navigate the difference with cultures, environment, climate, custom? You know, where there's so much that comes. I mean, if you just talk about colours, for example. Different colours represent different things in different countries. Red is a strong colour in Japan, and it's good luck and wealth. In other countries, it's so how do you navigate the adjustment? So
we have major impacts and we have minor impacts. So we have so think about it this way. So we kind of emerged from the Savannah Plains 200,000, maybe 250,000 years ago, depending on what you read, or and then all kinds of things happened in multiple ways, massive climate changes and stuff that caused us to rewire constantly. And the last big one was the Ice Age, kind of 11,500 years ago. That came to an end. And about 10,000 years ago, we became subsistence kind of farmers, and our communities became larger, and our time that we spent in a space became longer, and our relationships became deeper. But nothing drastic has happened since then. There's been no massive climate change, or nothing in the world that's happened, no massive volcanic eruptions that clouded the earth, nothing that caused us to rewire. So everything that triggered us 10,000 years ago still triggers us now. All those major triggers still exist in exactly the same format because nothing has been rewired. And so we behave actually almost completely the same or very similarly in environments. So maybe the saber-tooth isn't chasing us, but the deadline is. all kinds of other things, and we respond in exactly the same way. And that's why they talk so much about this predictably irrational behavior of humans, that we don't often understand the things that trigger us, but that they are there to trigger. And so those are the big things. But then you get minor things that are fluid, like color is quite fluid. Color changes through time, and we always say the same. As designers, we say red, the berries, fruit, and oranges and so things. They trigger our desire for food, and blue doesn't. We all talk about the same things, but it's not that crystal. So it is fluid. You and I have spoken about purple. That's only the reason that purple wasn't available. There are no purple animals in the world ever. There maybe at most in some areas some purple berries, but because they could crush the shell of this particular snail, they could, and because you were wealthy, you could extract a little bit of that purple dye and color the hem, and so it's royalty. But then it became, manufactured man-made, and everybody could have it. So now, but we still link it in some way, but it's no longer, you don't think that necessarily. We spoke about red earlier. There's a time we now know that red ties, dark suits is the kind of dress of a politician. It became known as the Obama uniform because he made it popular. Now Kennedy was the first one to actually wear it, and that was just a couple of years, 40 years or so after male prostitutes in Philadelphia wore it to advertise their availability.
I never knew that. There you go.
Yeah, and so because somebody like Kennedy was, the character and the presence that he was as a president, made that status through his display of it, it became that. And so color is quite fluid, and the triggers around color. So we can say red is, to your point earlier as well, red is a thing that we use in QSR because it's fast paced, and it reduces the time that we spend in a space, and that's what you want in quick service restaurants. But it's also, like in Pakistan and India, is the color of wedding dresses and purity, and so the behavior. So color it's quite fluid, and it bounces through time, and it's quite specific to culture. So that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then the other big one is proxemics. Right. So a sense of distance between, like you and I are quite close today. We'll never sit like this in normal. We're just doing it because of this, but in certain cultures, when you live in high density, it's normal. Yeah. When you live in spaces like Australia, which it's a big country with big space, our sense of proximity is bigger. Yeah.
So this is why on trains and in travel, when people are encroaching in your space, there's a panic, and we do.
Yeah.
But isn't that the behaviour? I'm an outgoing introvert. When I go to a restaurant, I want to sit on my own with my back to the corner and observe, in a corner somewhere. So, does temperament play a role in behaviour?
Look, you're the temperament expert. So we try to look more at what people do, not necessarily always why they do it, but what, and we observe those patterns constantly by looking at the understanding we have is specifically in hospitality space, because that's where we focus. Yeah. And so we know from constant observation that people act in those specific ways, and that's why we have a lot of rules that we apply, which I'm sure you would want to ask, but the 8 patterns of seating.
Yes, so don't even go there. Let's talk about
that. We can touch on that. So the 8 patterns of seating, we don't have to touch on all of them, but the one that you just referred to, more or less, we call it framing, and you'll see in a restaurant that people go to the corners first, mostly, and then from the corners they kind of come up along the walls, and it's only when that starts kind of filling up that they move to the centers. And they'll move to the centers, and we call that cocooning, where things are more protected. And you often find, I was in a restaurant yesterday, the guy asked me to look at it, and I said, this is just a wall. It's eating, like there's nothing in this thing that makes you feel comfortable anyway. So there's those things to address. So, and then you have things like what we call perching. People like to sit higher, and that's really something that's also kind of a throwback and a hardwiring. Higher means more powerful. You can fight better. you are superior. So perching, but it also then perching, so sitting up higher, also reduces with age. Like younger, you want to sit higher. You and think about how that, because you're moving up the ranks. Older, you want to sit at the bottom. You emphasize the fact that your knees are tight and everything else. You're not fighting for that position anymore.
Right.
And then things like what we call borrowing, which is our complete sense of safety, where we often solve that just a hole in the back that nothing can. The storerooms are done, everything, but there's still this hole, and we make it a really nice, plush, private dining space. And those things that are places that are almost always booked out. People love that for certain events or privacy, whatever. So there's a whole host of them, and they look out, and something we call the sunflower. The lookout is one where people would even sit in an uncomfortable space as long as there's a view outside, even if they're cold, whatever. Or the sunflower would say, people always tend to turn to the sun with it. And if they're even in an alley where maybe not too clean, or it's quite narrow, but you can get the sun in, punching out walls, it really changes the way we behave in that space.
Amazing. I'm thinking of the image I sent you yesterday of the
yes,
Dalek.
I absolutely love that. I sent it to everyone.
Oh, yeah, it's a gorgeous image of a Dalek. What would have been what would you have called it?
It looked to me like a little space shuttle.
Yeah, it looked like a Dalek that was decorated internally with I'll have to send you the image at a later stage, but the invitation
to sit there with that colour and the plushness and the light, correct.
And so we all about from a behaviour.
The negative space turns out positively.
Absolutely. And I think from a behavioural perspective, for my illustration, there's goals for the lifestyle stability information. From you're talking about the why. The goal setter is the choleric temperament. They want the most lucrative, flashiest position. They want that position of authority in a restaurant. They want to be seen. A lifestyle temperament, they gesticulate. From an Italian perspective, you're using your hands a whole lot more than anybody else. So you actually need room. You need to be in the middle of that restaurant. So those sort of things come into play as well. You talk about behaviour. Maybe you can name some obvious examples of predictive behaviour in a fractional manner.
But there are a few, but the one that really intrigues me a lot is this concept called Dunbar's number, which was, and Robert Dunbar's still alive, I think, but he looked at the social behavior of primates and the different brain sizes, and looked at their social circle, like they were grooming, and got to certain numbers within those observations. And then he multiplied that out into a human in the size of their brain, and got to the number 148.8, I think, and rounded it up to 150. And that's the interesting thing, because then you start breaking it down into, and a lot of studies were done. So 11th century English villages, by excavations, they could see that's the kind of number that the villages were in, until they kind of broke into next villages, and that was kind of max number. And the Spartans, their fighting units were between 140 and 150, and modern day fighting units are all in that number, 140 to 150, because that's a cohesive, that's the kind of number that we can control and feel part of. And then when you kind of forward it to today, most businesses, if you break them down, have units of above 150. They might not understand why things aren't working out. And the biggest example of that is if you go to Silicon Valley and you see where a company will rise from 5 in a garage to 150 overnight. Everything's smooth and hunky-dory. And at 150, all kinds of weird things start to happen. And so that 150 number, and that's why companies, if they understand it, break their units down in smaller groups that are below that, because it's just not a society anymore. And so there are also things like ceiling heights. We know from neuroimaging that high ceilings are conducive for creative thought. It's no longer a theory, it's fact.
And what do they put that down to, though? There must be.
You keep on asking these why questions.
Sorry.
I just know why. And low ceilings are conducive for analytical thoughts.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's quite important for creatives, right? To actually get that right.
Within your own offices. So, and colour, you've got some colour mention here, a reaction to colour.
Yeah, so I mean, we touched on that earlier. There's a reason politicians wear black suits because it's intimidating, you know.
Police also?
I said politicians, I meant police.
Right.
Politicians also, actually. I don't know why designers wear a lot of black. I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe it's also intimidating. I don't know.
Yeah. I think well, this is the, I guess it comes down to temperament, but also sometimes there's so much creativity here in colour. Sometimes it's easier to be colourless. You know, it's like a blank canvas sometimes. In terms of our evolutionary development, what's the impact of nature on our behaviour?
Yeah, so if you consider that as part of our evolution, 99% of the time we spent in nature. So there's all kinds of interesting impact of nature on us. And the 1% is the built environment. And so the built environment hasn't had and if you think about the Industrial Revolution, you think about the just kind of people stacked into square boxes. There's a lot that can be said about the impact of nature. So think trying to think of Lightman. Alan Lightman spoke about. He wrote a book, The Accidental Universe, the universe we thought we knew, and he talks about the importance of symmetry. Like if you think of how nature is, the wings of a butterfly, the petals of a flower, the outer body appearances will go be asymmetrical. Inside is not what we see. What we see is symmetrical. And that's why we default to symmetry in everything. Asymmetry is unhealthy. When you look at people, we think the more asymmetrical, the more unhealthy. It's just a subconscious thing. Doesn't mean it's like that, but it's just a subconscious thing. So, but it doesn't mean that one part is a mirror image of the next necessarily. So there's a Japanese concept called fugency, which is the counterbalance of either weight or color or whatever, to get balance. So, but if you talk to any designer, they mention balance. It's just that it's the way we hardwired from our nature and just the way we evolve. So, yeah, I think so. So nature has that.
You're talking about flowers and butterflies. And symmetry.
Yeah, what about it?
Well, I'm asking is that why we talk about biophilia as well, and we draw a lot from nature in our designing. Is that an element that you take into consideration when you're designing?
Yeah, well, just the principle really of that, and if you the principle of the impact of what nature kind of had on us. If you think of the flow of nature, the size, and talking about biophilia, there's a reason, and so Florence Nightingale spoke about this at length in her memoirs on healing, that there's an impact of nature on not only the mind but on the body as well. And of course, that was the observation. It wasn't at the time how could you prove it, but then many years later, in 1984, the studies done on gallbladder patients and how the ones facing windows in nature healed much quicker than the ones that didn't, by days. And it was just observed then. And now, of course, we know just from, again, neuroimaging and science, and there's so many scientists teaming up with architects and designers now because there's a massive interest in understanding how we react to space and color and in nature and so forth. So there's suddenly this awareness of kind of the impact of all these things in nature being a massive one. And now post-COVID, so the one thing that happened in COVID, which is fantastic, is that we spend so much time at home and so much time in our gardens. We took our animals for walks, and we would, on the phone, just step out the house and walk into the garden. So the impact that reconnections happen quite beautifully, quite seamlessly, without people actually realizing why. Biophilia is now taken over, really. People are so, and it's everywhere, and good that it's everywhere because it does make for healthier spaces.
I mean, it oxygenates the air, for one, but also green from an aesthetic perspective. Green is calming, it's soothing. For those of you who are coming to the colour workshop in a few weeks' time, green is calming and neutralising. It's digested through the iris. It affects the hypothalamus and changes our physiology and how we feel. The green is very calming and relaxing, and it's lovely. I mean, for those of you who've been to Caroma on Collins, you know that we're very biophilic and cutting friendly. So please come in and get some of that. You're looking at your space. How do you personally design a space where people behave more naturally, intuitively, and comfortably?
So we've just talking about what we said earlier. So we've made a whole lot of rules for ourselves, and it's why we needed to make the rules. It's very difficult with new people coming in and to you can't by osmosis explain. There needs to be kind of a reference set, and also when we speak to clients, that we have a similar method of transferring or what our position is and how we're approaching. So we've established a whole lot of rules of 8 and why 8. I don't. It just happened to be 8. And so, for example, it's 8 moments of truth, which we can touch on. It's the 8 seating patterns, which we touched on already. It's our 8 behavioral kind of biases, which are primary for social spaces. I mean, there are more, but when these are the ones that we focus on, if we solve those, you solve the most. And then specifically for hospitality, kind of the 8 ways that we actually order food. And often menu is just one. There's 7 others, and the 7 other ones are actually very important, and we don't tend to think about them. But if we're conscious of them, and that's why that kind of book for us exists, or the references for us exist, is that we make sure that not all of them are applicable to all the spaces, but just going through them, we are aware at least, oh yeah, let's think about that as well, because you miss it. Like, oh yeah, we never thought of that. Let's just go over these plans one more time. How is the food traveling exactly from the pass through the tables to the end? How's it? Let's just look at that flow again, because that's one of the ways that people order food. And how many times have you sat in a restaurant where something comes past you, you've been looking at the menu, but then something comes and you look at it and you follow it, and as the waitress comes back, you say, what are they having? What is that?
I'll have what she's having.
I'll have what she's having. It happens all the time. If you're aware of that, you can almost make it pass a little bit longer, so it passes by more people. You tick a big thing there.
Yeah. Tell us about you talked about what are the 8 moments of truth? Maybe just touch.
So you'll touch on a few there. We don't have to do all of them.
No.
But so the moments of truth. So it really comes from the principle of I'm trying to remember his name. The airline. It'll come back to me. And he was a CEO at the time, and became COO, then CEO within a short span of time. This is the way to turn the airline around, is to, what are all the moments? What's the moment from the first booking to when you curbside, the luggage out of a cab or public transport to checking in. Anyways, so I went through those. And Jan Paulson was his name.
Oh, thank you.
And so all those little moments are also called moments of impact. And so one of the things were like looking at we spoke about airline food earlier, and he said, let's put the olives back in martinis, which is a bizarre thing, but people absolutely love it. Real olives back in a martini. Yeah. And all those little moments of truth and moments of impact changes the entire thing. So we have 8. So just touching on a few. So we have, for example, the moment of hello, but that starts on your phone. The front door to anything is your phone. It's no longer the front. And there's, then what you see online. So you're interested by something you see, whatever social media, wherever, but it needs to be quite similar everywhere. So the same DNA sits across that first moment of hello. And a lot of companies get that wrong. And then the second one is the moment of hello of the space. What's the body language? Because people break spaces down the same way they break down people. So what's the body language of the space? Is it welcoming? Is it everybody's friend? Can I kick off my shoes, or do I need to wear a tie? Everything happens in the first moment you actually approach the space and you see it. You see the signage. The louder, the bigger the signage, the more informal it normally is. The smaller the signage, the more formal it normally is. And then the things like, then the second one is the first moment of hello by the host or hostess. And that person has to make you feel like you're the most important person that walked in that day.
No shadow of doubt.
And if they don't, you just don't feel like you're part of their community, or that welcome. And you'll stay longer because of how welcome. Like, think of a friend. If the friend makes you feel very welcome, you'll stay longer, you'll have a better time. But if it's, you're going to look at your watch and get out of there. Yeah. and so that first hello is critical. And so Corbin and King speak about that. Well, they did. One of them passed away. I'm not sure which one now, but I mean, they had the Wolseley in London, which was spectacularly successful. spoke about that quite a bit, that first moment of hello, how important it was. And then I'm just getting sidetracked a little bit. I just want to mention that they also mentioned something quite interesting, which I absolutely love. They said restaurants are not about the food. You're not selling food, you're selling entertainment.
That's true.
Which is amazing. I thought that. And so another moment of truth is the tables and chairs. What is that setting like? You know, the lighter the chair, the shorter the stay. Think about a quick service restaurant or something where you just go for a quick bite. Those are always light chairs. You move them with your, you know, but a big, like a formal, the more formal the chairs are heavy, they're more plush. You kind of feel like you've arrived, like you're sitting somewhere important. So what are the table and chairs? What's on the table and chair? How's it lit? And people get that wrong a lot. That moment of, because everything then happens at the table. The journey from the front door, you see a couple of things, you smile, you look, and there's a moment of introduction. But once you're at the table, it is your personal space, and everything else happens. It's the texture of the table, the menu that says on it, the cutlery and crockery, everything needs to be thought about quite a bit. The distance from one table to the next, how close is it? And it depends on what type of restaurant it is. But never space people so far away that they can't hear what the other person is saying. People actually want to hear, it's a gossip. That's how we are. We want to just listen to just slightly at the moment of quiet. What are they? So, and then just to end off, and we spoke about food already. The moment of goodbye is 7 times more important than the moment of hello. It's to say, the host or whatever, bring your wife next week. We're getting fresh oysters. But suddenly you feel like you
invitational.
Yeah, and you'll make a plan. You'll come there, you feel welcome.
It's true of every industry, though. I think back to my Qantas hosty days, and we used to have the professional fiddle. And when you deliver a tray, if you're down the back of the bus, you know, you're putting the glass. I mean, it's different, it's slightly different these days. I'm not going to go into the current CEO of that airline, but when you turn the emblem to the front, you know, every customer was the most important customer. Every person was the most important passenger. If we go to a hotel room, that 20-cent chocolate on the pillow, when you're pulling back the 1,000-count thread linen, makes a difference to your stay. You'll rebook that hotel again. Those small professional finishes are going to change your perception or view of that space.
And hotel rooms are like that. I mean, they need to make you feel quite special. It's all the small things. It's exactly the same as any other hospitality. It's the comfort of the bed and the cushions. You know, I was saying in a hotel recently that I could never, ever, these cushions, how could you? But they need to be. Those are the small things. That's why you cover the way it's lit. The fact that every control, because how many hotels have you been in where the controls are just, must I get out of bed now to switch this thing off? It needs to be just there when you've already settled in and that you can control everything from there. Nothing, it must be as comfortable. And a lot of those things are within all those creature comforts. There's practice, but there you need to be super practical.
Yeah.
Like really in everything, you need to really think about the customer journey or the patron, the guest journey, exactly as they come from the front door, through the front, where do they put their luggage? How far in is it? Our luggage often gets put on, but then you have to access the luggage. And how far from that point to the cupboard? So I can read, and is there enough cupboard space? You know, how long can people stay? Because, you know, at the time, I stayed in, actually, it's different Wolseley, but the Wolseley Hotel in Mayfair with a client recently. And I stayed there for 10 days. And it also felt welcome to stay there for 10 days. The cupboards were big and luxurious. I could pack up everything, nothing. So it's all those little things.
And how did you feel about yourself in that space? Because you feel differently in a different
100%.
space.
You feel different. You feel you just.
Well, you think differently of yourself also.
Correct. You just, I mean, there's a reason certain hotels just have a bigger occupancy than others. And the hotel room is the most important of all the spaces in the hotel. So there are restaurants and they're important, but the hotel rooms.
We have actually got at the end of the month the speaker coming, David Bowen. David is looking after Sky Suites. So we're talking about designing for hospitality specifically. So we're really looking forward to David's talk as well as part of the panel, because he's looking after 3 very highly featured hotels within Australia. So looking forward to that. You talk about the 8 moments of truth that separate a well-designed space to an experiential, well-considered and well-executed space. We've talked about the moments of truth. Jan Carlson, you spoke about. You've already spoken about that.
We have.
Okay. You want to go? So the first moment of truth, the digital hello. The second moment of truth, the physical hello. Body language.
Yeah, that body language is really, as I said earlier, it's the body language not only of the patron or the host or the hostess, it's the body language of the building or the restaurant, or it's the body language of the outside, and the things that that it goes beyond. A good restaurateur will actually make sure that the path to their restaurant, that is not the lease line, is actually clean, and it's, so we call it the pothole in the parking syndrome. So if somebody had to, not just walk through and break a heel, what's the emotion going to be like when they enter your space? You have nothing to do with that. It happened before they entered, but now it's your problem.
Right.
Like, how do you turn that? So a good restaurateur will always make sure that the pavement is nice, clean, and swept. That even the bins outside are not overflowing, and they just, everything's so. Or a bit of a noise there, and so that's the body language. And then as you enter, so what's the first thing that you see, and the second thing, what's the journey, what's the story? And storytelling, on that point, maybe I can just extract on that. Storytelling in every hospitality venue is critical. It's critical in a hotel, in a restaurant, in a bar, and that's maybe something to just start a little bit. Is you often walk into a place and it feels disconnected. It feels something you can't, again, put your finger on, but it's disconnected because the story is not a cohesive story. So it's important, I think, as a designer, we try and script a story for every thing that we do, even if the story doesn't live, because people like, and it doesn't work. I mean, you see it often in the back of a menu. There's a story that people have written. That's not why you do a story. Story is not really for the public that much. It's for everybody that makes up the story for the public to enjoy. So when you script, it's a bit like scripting writing a script for a movie. So who are the characters? What is the story? Where is it set? And the storyline, as the more detailed that storyline is, the more detail everybody has. Like the person that does the costume design, the location scout. When you start interviewing for the leading characters and all the characters, so it's exactly the same for a great hospitality space. Who, like when you start interviewing, what kind of profile of person needs to work there, what do the uniforms look like, what is the food. So it all comes down to a story. And you also have David Ovens coming to speak here, and David is a master at writing a script, writing a story, and he often bounces, say, what do you think of this story? Does it resonate? Does it work? And he will then pass that story to every single person that's involved, from the graphic designer to the person looking for sites. They have in their organization a very specific person that looks out for sites, and us, and everything, because we don't necessarily talk direct, but it comes together in such a beautiful way.
So what does the story look like? Give us an illustration of a story that's been created from a design perspective.
Well, I think a nice one, and it does live on. It's true maybe to talk about, but the one that's a good story that is Six Head at the Rocks. So there's a big negative connotation, obviously, to kind of the first fleet now, and it's something have also spoken about, but there's a beautiful part of it as well, like when they picked up the first head of cattle. And those head of cattle came here on the first fleet and got lost shortly after arriving, and kind of they wandered off one lunchtime, and they were discovered 8 years later, and it multiplied to 100, and it saved the colony from starvation.
Wow.
And now you look at Australia, and it's the biggest cattle ranches they're here. I mean, you fly from one side to the other, and you need to fill up the chopper twice just to get. I mean, they're massive, and they produce. The meat industry is incredible. So it's a story of the story of the cattle, the story of their journey, the story of how that saved the colony. So it's built up around that, and then it also pays homage to, from there were 1,500 souls on board, everybody, including all the convicts that came. So it just recognizes that. So it's got all these sailors' knots that hang in a tapestry, 1,500 of them in a tapestry on the wall. But within scripting that story, it impacted the menu, how the tables look. So like the symbol for a cow's head is quite similar to an A, Just a head of cattle is quite similar to an A. So in the sixth head, and the name is turned upside down, the face is. So that's informed the menu design. It informed inlays in the table. It informed the color palette and the texture palette, the fabrics, materials. And so when you walk in, it does feel cohesive. But there are many others. I mean, David wrote a fabulous story on this fictitious character called Isabella that came out from Italy and with no money and with a rich dream and beautiful girl and an incredible eye for detail and warm with people. And then he wrote a beautiful story. And that's the story we get in the designer restaurant.
That was David.
That was David. There's a designer restaurant around this. And it was a crystal story. When we presented the design, that's Isabella's restaurant.
So we've talked a little bit. You've got a lovely team. Tell us about your boys. You've got two beautiful boys.
My senior associates,
Yes.
Calvin and Roberta, they are wonderful. They absolutely love this hospitality space. They are also very invested in making sure that what we do plays out the way we want it, and they wouldn't for a moment hesitate to get on a ladder and adjust the light or take the decor off the walls. Like Isabella's a good example because there's all these trinkets of her life, photographs of the family, and wouldn't hesitate to get on a ladder and actually take it all off and redo it when they get to a site. And
they're invested. They're invested.
Yeah, they understand it. They've been working with me for 10 years. They love it. It's beautiful to kind of bounce thoughts off them.
That's where I'm going. I mean, obviously, you know this stuff back to front, but people have got to take this into their practices. So I've seen the way, to some degree, you work with your team from getting a script or a story to creating a space. And it's an interesting way of layering the way you do it. So how do you do it personally? How do you work?
So obviously the first thing is to have a view of the potential site, and no site is ever signed anymore without us having a look at. I can't remember the last time I heard a client that said, I signed a site, can you make it work? It's more, can you go look at the site? I'm thinking of signing this. And so we've had a wonderful it's great to be involved like that, where we analyze, as we said, outside, what could it be potentially outside, externally, internally, how can it journey? Is it high enough? Do you have enough space to actually make a meaningful kitchen? Because you have to think about that as a designer. You can't say, well, I don't design kitchen, I design this appeal. You have to think about it.
Holistically.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And so we'll do that in what we call a mud map, and that mud map will go to the clients, and this is sketch or a series of sketch. Often it's 4, 5, 10 of them. Just these are the options of how I can make the space work, and this is how it'll flow, and this is the journey from the front door and so forth. And then from that, if that can work and we can make the numbers work, because also every chair is a turnover. If there are not enough chairs, you can't make the rent work, and the rent is a percentage, hopefully around 7-8% of the expected turnover. And as a designer, you need to think about that. You not just, what do the numbers look like?
It's not a blank check, right?
No, and you have to be so responsible to your client and advise it. But in fact, I'm seeing a client on Monday, which I said, I wouldn't touch the site. I'm not doing this. It won't work. And the reason I said it won't work, and he's also an astute restaurateur, knows that. He said, the rent is this. How many seats can we put in? So many. That doesn't work. And so he walked away from the site about 6 months ago, and phoned me this morning to say, okay, the landlord's now come back to it. He'll offer the rent. Now it works.
Right.
So those are, even before you started designing, those are things you need to look at.
So normally an architect or designer doesn't necessarily look at the outcome financially of a potential business when they've given a job. So that's, unless I'm wrong, there might be others out there that obviously behave that way.
Yeah, look, I think designers are more and more starting to do that. I think we certainly don't. That's for us a non-starter. If we're not entirely secure in what we know from our side, in any event, that this has the potential of really smashing it and being like really successful, when we are uncomfortable, we'll tell the client we're very uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's very integrous. That some would just take their money, right? They take the money and run.
But they won't come back. You see, they won't
come back.
They won't come back.
That's
You know,
exactly
once you've had the relationship with the clients, that's a long-term relationship. You might lose in the short run, but you gain in the long.
Yeah, absolutely. And then your integrity is on the line.
Sure.
You know, your reputation precedes you because you are doing exactly that. A couple of questions or comments in the thread here. Catherine, lovely to see you on, Catherine. Our students are working on a design project transforming a warehouse into a boutique hotel in Camperdown. This is an exceptional resource, outstanding tips for interior designers creating a hotel brand and user experience. We might get you to connect with Catherine and have a one-on-one with the students because he's a wonderful a resource rather. So having talked about our behaviour, if one understands behaviour well, one could potentially design a far healthier space. Illustratively, hospital, something that we do a lot of at Caroma and Collins. We do a lot of hospices, hospitals, obviously bathrooms and germs are prolific at the moment this time. So tell us, can you elaborate a little bit on healthier spaces?
So we know, and as we touched on Florence Nightingale earlier, and we touched on the gallbladder, which you know studies have shown that nature is critical, but also also color and so the anesthesia of white space doesn't. There's nothing healthier about a white wall than a colored wall. It's a ridiculous thing. So Joan Meyerskoff has done incredible work in like the Sheffield Children's Hospital, where it's beautiful, it's bright, it's colorful, and it's inviting, and it's fun to be in, and children are less. Look, if you have fear, also that there's a lower chance of healing, so the children are happier, and so there's, I think, also the lighting. There's you find so many of these hospitals are just really bright fluorescent, and it's not at all ever a space for people. It's a space, it's a factory, it's a space to work in, it's a space for doctors, but it's not a space for the people that actually come to be healed. And so there's a massive turnaround worldwide to really look at all those things, from the way it's lit to the way it's decorated to the views onto the gardens, and actually bringing nature inside the space. I have a colleague in Dubai that showed me his hospital spaces that he's done, or busy doing now. Marcus Wilkinson, he's doing phenomenal work with that in bringing nature inside. I think you don't always have to solve all of those things, but just moving away from the traditional understanding of a hospital and solving some of those will go a long way to making it really places of healing, because often hospitals are not that.
No, they're not. No, they're not at all. So look, well, if there's any other questions, please pop them in the thread. Catherine's a little on the excited side. I think she's got her students logged in at the moment. So Catherine's all smiles for you to potentially come and assist. If there's any other questions, pop them in the thread. But we're coming to the hour and a close. Just as we close, obviously, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your business and the sort of jobs that you'd be open to, because I know that a lot of practices employ your services. They don't necessarily do them themselves. So perhaps
so we focus very specifically on hospitality, restaurant, bars, and hotels, because there is a specific behavior there that is different to retail, and retail is quite a different animal. And I don't think that you can be a great retail designer and a great hospitality. I don't think so. Maybe somebody, but it's not. If you want to really make it work, you have to kind of choose where you work. So we've done some amazing. Well, I say amazing, but we enjoy the work that we do tremendously, and we know that the clients have an outcome there that works for them financially. But we will often step away from things that we know would be impactful and meaningful from what we've been taught as designers. So, for example, we would step away from embellishing a ceiling, or step away from making a floor with an expensive finish, because we've done the studies. I stand outside of the clipboard and ask every single person walking out, tell me about the floor, tell me about the ceiling. Nobody can. Hardly anybody can. They don't notice that. So if they don't notice that, then why spend the client's money there? There's places to spend the client's money, and that's, as I said earlier, like the furniture is critical. Spend the money on the lighting, just the way that the light pools in the middle, and understand what that lighting needs to be. Like people talk about restaurants as 300 and 400 lux, and it's not true. The table's no more than like 70 or 80 lux. It's dim, dim, dim. And there's a reason for that, because if the food is dimly lit, then we feel more or less conspicuous in eating all the food. And we also look a lot better. Dim light, and if we look better, we feel better.
And you eat more.
And you eat more, you have a better time. You kind of not so, you're not in the spotlight. And we spoke about acoustics and all those things. And so we recently we did some work again with Marcus Wilkins in Pakistan, some hotels, and we applied all the basic rules that we know of hospitality there before we went there, and things like rolling out the red carpet. Nobody says roll out the green carpet or the blue carpet or the yellow carpet. Roll out the red carpet. So we have in this specifically it's a Hilton hotel, and we busy now with a DoubleTree Hilton, a DoubleTree by Hilton. But a similar approach, where it's a little bit quirky. It involves local artists, because we all have a pride in our culture, but it just does everything with a twist. Everything's got a slight twist. So it's just new enough, like oversizing things. And as I said, the carpet starts actually in the parking lot, and it's different material, of course, and it goes right through the foyer. It actually goes up a vertical wall for 22 meters and across again. So you can't walk up there, of course, but it's the sense, and it wraps over the counter, and then up then at the top again, you see it in the garden, runs through a garden. The garden is along in the middle of this hotel, and it's flanked by the rooms. So you see this beautiful garden with this red carpet running through it. And then we have, like we spoke earlier about sitting just a little bit, just close enough so you can, we all like to have a little bit of glimpse or hear something if we're not supposed to quite. And so we have,
it's been very enlightening about you today.
No, so we have these fountains, these viewports down into the big what do I call it, like the hall where they have weddings, and so you can have a glimpse from the top to things that you may not expect. Just have a glimpse. You can't see the whole thing anyway. So there's all these little vignettes of little moments that sit through the space. And in the rooms we've designed I think 6 or 7 typologies, and they're all, some of the rooms are just because biomimicry is important as well as biophilia. So some of the things are just, so in the entrance, it's 30-meter entrance. We have a lot of origami birds that just hang and they fly up through this entire space. But when every time you open the door, kind of they move around. So it's quite a captivating space. And then in the rooms, we have these oversized wallpapers of different naturescapes, but they differ by room, because whether you print 1 or 100, it's just, you can now with digital print you can do whatever you want to do. So the rooms are, we wanted to make every room different, but the client said no, you can have 5 or 6.
So in answer to the question, because you've gone on another journey. Callie, well, the question was, what does your business focus on? And we're right on the hour, so we do have to wrap. I'll tell you myself, because he hasn't told you, he's gone on a story of trying to get us on a field trip, which is something I'd love to do. So Catherine, put that one in the diary. Let's look at going to Hilton in Lahore and have a little look at that journey, right? Restaurants, bars, hotels. That's the primary. So if you would like to reach out to Callie and speak to him about his services and his business's services, you can do that via myself. I will ensure that those details are passed on. Otherwise, your business name is Design Partnership. And I'll put the details in a thank you email. There are a couple of questions we didn't get to. One I'd like to talk to just very, very quickly. And the question is, what would the best resources be to study behaviour and design? And I'll answer that. Callie has a book coming out. So I'm flagging that one. There might be an ebook ahead of time. But
that is
you happy with that?
A little while away. We're just finalising the makeup now, so but yes, this year. Okay,
having said that, there's also speaking opportunities for Callie, so please if you'd like him to come and speak potentially in your practice, or there's a an opportunity to find out more, just the beginning of the journey. We hope you've enjoyed today and trust that you all stay safe. And Callie, that was awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Fascinating
Thank you
time.
everyone for coming, dialing in.
We do have a survey, so I'm going to get the girls to pop that up on the screen. If you'd like to tell us how fabulous Callie was today, which would be great, we can just pop that in the scanner and or post event. Would love to hear your feedback, and please send us a note. It's always good to hear that you've had a good time. All right, you have a great day. You take care.